Hi, we're Shane and Natalie.
And we like to play board games.
Because we're nerds.
And we're lonely nerds.
It's just the two of us most of the time. So we like to play games that work for two. Sometimes there's games that are made for two.
And sometimes there are games like the one we're going to review today that are made for more players. This one is made for up to 7.
7 people. We don't know 7 people.
Not that are old enough to play board games anyway.
So it's just the two of us. So we're going to take a look at Caverna. This is a massive game, one of these Uwe Rosenberg sort of like, farming games, which are very popular, a very heavy game according to most people's rankings. So let's see what we think of it for 2. So first, a quick overview. There's no way we could go through all the rules of this.
That would be a 30-minute video in and of itself.
Although, honestly, once you know them, it's not as bad.
No.
But we'll talk about that. Mm-hmm. So in any event, the game is played over 12 rounds, although with 2 players...
It's 11.
It's 11 rounds. You skip round 9. Why round 9? I don't know. But that's the one. So the idea of the game is that you have these... boards. Each person gets their own board, and you have a cave and you have an area to farm. And what you're doing is you need to build up your cave and you need to build up your farm, and whichever player essentially does the best is going to win. It's a very similar game to Agricola, if you're familiar with that. It's been considered a sequel to Agricola. Maybe we could talk about how that compares later on, but one of 2 major differences, or there's other ones between the 2, is that this game has these tiles. And each one of these tiles is unique. They're each a separate room. And these rooms fill up your cave.
So, for example, it would go here.
It would go there. Cave. And so then you also have these other tiles, like this one here, which is part field and part pasture, and these ones fill up your farmland. And then within your cave, there's also other things like you can build other cave structures. You're basically excavating the cave. You can build, I'm looking for it. You can build mines in your cave as well. And so this would not be legal, but you'll eventually be building them up. And so the idea is on each round of the 12 or 11 in the 2-player games, you have workers. It's a worker placement game of sorts. Essentially, you have dwarves, okay? And these dwarves, you start with 2, can take actions. The actions are on this board. You'll notice that there are a total of 12 actions that are available right now. And then Natalie just put a card out, because what you do before the game is you randomize
I already did.
a series of these other 11 in a 2-player game, 12 in a greater number of player game. These other cards, and each round you put one out. So there's a little randomness in which order these things come out in, but for the most part, the game is pretty straightforward. Now, in between each round, what you'll do is you'll fill up some of these spaces here with resources. So, for example, we don't have to go through everything, but this one will get wood, right? And then these 2 will get stones. And then there's some that will get ore. There's some that will get rubies. And then there's others that will get sheep and animals and things
later
like that later in the game. So give me a sheep, maybe. And then so we don't have a place for it right now, but there's another card that will go out that you'll put the sheep on. And as what you get to do is on each of your turns, you will place your worker dwarf on one of these options. And depending on what it is, you will be able to take the resources. So this one, I could take all of these wood all for myself. In the last game we played, I took a lot of wood all for myself.
Yes, you took 10 wood right before I was getting ready to take 10
wood.
The
other thing that you could do is some of these allow you to modify your board. So for example, this one would allow me to take one of these tiles and place it down on my board. And so now I have a field and I have a meadow, which I could via other ones, like for example, here, although that it's not strictly, that's not the right spot, but basically I could convert that into a pasture. Actually, that is the right spot. And that pasture would allow me to put some sheep in there, or to put some wild boar, or to put some cows, and so on, or donkeys. So this game has donkeys, sheep, cows, and boars. The other thing that could happen is on a spot, and there's dogs too, but they don't need to go in the pasture. The other thing that you could do is using some of these worker placement spots, we could go ahead and plant wheat on one of these areas, or we could plant vegetables, which are little pumpkins, and then later on in the game, we would be able to harvest them for more food. Now, food is important because food is kind of like an upkeep mechanic. Not every round, but most rounds in the game, you're going to have to feed your dwarves. Now, you start with 2 dwarves, but throughout the course of the game, using different actions, you could gain up to 5 dwarves, and one person is able to have a 6th dwarf, although they would probably not get that until very late into the game.
Yeah.
You have to feed your dwarves 2 food for each
round that you have.
For each dwarf that you have. Basically, there's minor exceptions to that rule, but that's the general idea. How do you do that? Well, throughout the game, depending on the actions you're choosing, you are gaining, maybe animals to put there. You are, again, gaining wheat and things like that. And then at certain times in the game, you get to harvest the wheat. At certain times in the game, you get to reproduce your animals. So at certain points, if I had 2 sheep, right, the animals would breed and I would get a 4th sheep. 3rd sheep. Math. So then the next thing is that another major difference between Agricola and this one is that these rubies sort of account for everything.
They're wild card.
They're wild card. You can use these to purchase some of these, well, not all of them, but some of these upgrades. You can use them. The big thing is to exchange always for food. So you can exchange 1 ruby basically is worth 2 food, more or less. Although there's different ways of kind of, manipulating that. But that's a way that makes it easier to feed your dwarves throughout the course of the game. All right. So that's the basic idea. So within your forest area, I forget what they actually call it, you are building up fields and pastures to keep your animals. Within your cave, you are building up a couple of things. You're building up caverns, right? And the caverns are going to allow you to place some of these rooms. Now, or they might allow you to place a mine, depending. This would not be legal, but the point is that you could do that. And that mine would allow you to get more ore, or to get more rubies, or whatever.
Points.
Some more points. Long and short of it. Okay? So you have these different tiles. The green ones are all some kind of basically power that is either a passive power, or there's not really active powers, but a kind of active power. Some of them give you discounts on purchasing things. Some of them give you more income. Some of
these give you resources every round.
Every turn. Things like that. The orange ones are important. These are dwellings. And in order to gain more dwarves, so more workers, you need to first build more dwellings. And some of these will allow you to also keep animals, or there's special things with those. And then these yellow ones are all basically points. So these are essentially victory points that you are getting, but they work differently. Some of them give you victory points for how many resources you have at the end of the game. Some of them give you victory points just based on the state of the board in some way, or how many animals you have.
Yeah.
Some of them give you victory points, right? Based off of throughout the game, you can trade stuff.
Yeah, I'm trying to find one of those. So, for example, this one lets you trade 2 grain for 3 money or 4 food. But the money is essentially victory points at the end of the game.
The money is victory points. So that's just a straight victory point thing.
But you can spend the victory points throughout the game for things.
And then you have like this writing chamber. Prevents up to 7 negative points. So at the end of the game, when you score it, you're going to gain points for different things, but you're also going to lose points if you don't have all of the different kinds of animals, or if you don't have all of these spaces on the board filled up. So the writing chamber would allow you to just ignore that, just for example. So there's a lot of variation here. And that's not really a rules overview exactly, but that's how do you play the game in really kind of broad terms, okay? So now let's talk about the game itself. So as always, what are our first impressions?
It's a really nice looking game. For some reason, the artwork on this game really not hits the spot, but it really fits the game and the theme. It works really, really well. Just the way the artwork is for later in the game. I'm just pulling up some of these cards, although not many of them actually have much. But the artwork on the cards is just, and on all of the pieces, is just really nice, and it really suits the theme. It's not too serious, but it's also not a game like Munchkin where it like completely won't take itself seriously.
Right. I like the components as well. This has that really nice sort of all the little wooden shapes. I really go for that in a game. Honestly, it goes a long way to making me enjoy it, just because you're touching this stuff and you're acting, you're looking at it, and it looks pretty. It looks engaging as you kind of are basically
dealing with
it. It just looks nice as you go throughout the course of the game. As you build it up, it just kind of looks nice. And especially as you start to sort of do all the little animals and things, and you get those. So I'm just gonna move this so we can see it a little better. But one of the nice things about this is the way that just as you kind of go throughout the game, the board builds up, and you have these different stacks of tiles, and you have these sort of it just really looks like you're doing something. Yeah,
it builds up. It's not just like your personal board isn't just flat. It does physically build up.
It's kind of going to sound silly, but different people do different things for work. And some people really like working with their hands. I used to work at CVS, and although I like the job that I do now better than that, there's still something that was nice about when you work at a place like that, you put up a thing of a bunch of spaghetti sauce, and at the end of the day, you can look at it and say, "Look at that! I made all that thing of spaghetti sauce," and it's nice to see that you've done something.
It's nice to have a physical product at the end of whatever you're doing.
And so we'll move into the gameplay now with this transition. That one of the things I've seen other people say, and I kind of agree with it, I think, is that even if you didn't do if you don't win or you didn't, succeed as well as you'd like in the game, you can still kind of look at your thing at the end and say, "That's kind of cool. I made this thing." You know.
Well, I have not won a single game. In fact, I do terribly. I consistently have been scoring like 56. But I still enjoy playing the game. It's because it's fun placing all the tiles and kind of building it up.
Yeah.
I am not good at it, but I still enjoy it.
So let's talk about the gameplay itself. We always talk about it from the standpoint of strategy and tactics. I think that this is the most strictly strategic game we really have.
Yeah.
A lot of games, and I enjoy those, and there's not anything wrong with them, but there's a lot of games out there
that are very tactical.
They are a matter of, well, what do I do now in this moment? There's not that many of these sort of modern games, at least not any of the ones we have. And to be honest, I mean, I knowing a lot about the different games that are out there and listening to other people talk and things like that, it sounds like the ones that are really most popular, most in the broadest audience, are the ones that are just not as strategic. There's certainly some games that are very strategic that are very popular, but they're popular amongst. There's a type of player that likes those games. I think this one is, because every game, essentially, there's not a lot of randomness. These cards are random as they go out in dictating which order the different options open up for different spaces.
But there's only like basically you have 4 stages and there's only 3 options per stage.
In other words, these 3 cards are always going to come out as the first 3.
Yeah.
They might not be in the same order every time, but you're always going to get those 3 first. And you're always going to get these 3 next.
And this will always be the 4th one.
That's always the 4th one. And so there's not that much. So in a sense,
it's not really random.
It's not that random. It's almost like chess in that you can have your standard opening, or as you keep playing over time, other people could adapt to the way you're opening and sort of.
It becomes like chess maneuvers rather than just reacting to whatever the variation is on the board that's for that particular game.
Now, speaking of which, how as far as the player interaction is something that people care about. What would you say?
I feel like it's there, but it's also, you could ignore it if you wanted to.
It's you know what? At least with 2, there's enough in the way of
options.
You know what? There's a lot of spaces here for options for what you could do.
Even to start off with.
Because
to start off with, you have 13.
13. But it still feels like you often enough kind of get in each other's way.
Yeah, but it's not actively going after.
Right, but it's not so often, and it's not in such a way that it's really frustrating necessarily. There's always something you can do that's useful. And so there is some tactics in the sense of maybe you wanted to do one thing now, and you're going to have to do that next round. Yeah. And so maybe that adjusts the way that you decide the order in which to do things next round, so you make sure that you get the thing you want. But it's never, maybe you want the wood. But they took it, so you have to
take one of the other ones.
Take one of the other ones, or wait, or do something else. There's another thing actually that we forgot to mention in the rules, is that you can also go on these expeditions, which is that
you have the weapons.
Yep, is that as basically you can spend this is a whole other element of the game, and you can basically start building up your dwarf, starting at level 1 or getting all the way up to level 14, and that gives you when you go on these expeditions different rewards. But unlike these options here, each expedition essentially allows you to claim different things at once. So I could go here and get rocks. And get a bunch of rocks. Yeah. But I could also do an expedition and maybe get a rock and also
you could get a rock
and pumpkin.
Yeah, say you had like a level 5 early in the game. You could get a boar, and you could get a rock, and you could get a sheep.
Yeah. And so you could do different things. And so that's another element. But then there's this kind of decision making there, because once you start putting weapons on your dwarves, you're only allowed to play them in a certain order. Yeah. And you might be wanting to do that, and the other player might be wanting to do that, and then you're kind of butting heads.
Because you're going for because the expeditions can, so like this expedition lets you pick 3 things. Yeah. This one only lets you pick 1.
Pick 1 thing.
So
there's definitely a player engagement thing there. In terms of you are running into each other, but it's not so much that it's frustrating. You never feel like your turn is a waste.
Yeah, it's not like, I think, which one was it? Heaven and Nail, maybe? Where if somebody took the thing you were going for, you're just kind of screwed. And there's nothing you can do.
Sometimes.
There's usually a little bit more adaptability here.
Or there's other games, like Viticulture has a thing where sometimes, and which a game we like, and we haven't done a video, but we will, sometimes you kind of can't do what you really need to because somebody took the thing. And there is this option with the extra big worker to sort of supersede and get in there anyways. And that's something a few games have implemented. This game doesn't really have anything like that in the 2-player version.
But I don't think it necessarily needs it.
That's the point. Yeah. Is that there's enough
there's enough ways to do different things.
This is a game that kind of, speaking of the components, right? That people are going to look at this and feel overwhelmed. I feel overwhelmed in a good way. It's cool, all this stuff. But some people are definitely going to say, look at all this stuff. I have to think about all these different things. There's how many different animals, how many different resources, there's a bajillion of them. But the thing is...
depending on how you play the game, you don't need them all.
Well, you don't, but the other thing is that the way that the resource, the way that the worker placement thing works out, because there's so many, that means there's always something useful you can go after.
even once you hit the end of the game where you've both got like 4 or 5 workers out, you've also got this by the 12th last round, you've got math 16 plus 16, 32.
You get 32.
You got 32 options for 10 workers, saying you both have 5.
And so maybe you don't get the thing you wanted, but you can get something else that's also good. And that's the nice thing about it. I never feel in this game like my turn is just kind of a waste because of what she did.
Oh, broom service. Broom service is the one I was thinking of, where your turn can get completely thrown off.
Completely thrown off, yeah.
You have a limited number of turns in this game.
Yep.
But there's always an option. You can't get so completely thrown off that your entire round is wasted.
Now, this game also has that kind of, it's present in a few games. Everdell is a very notable one where and I like that mechanic where it feels like at the beginning you can't accomplish anything. And then by the end you can accomplish a lot.
Yeah.
I feel like the ramp up in this game is
a little slower than Everdell to me.
I was going to say sudden.
I was just going to say it's more sudden. I feel like the ramp up in Everdell is slower, but
but bigger at the end.
I don't know if I would say it's bigger at the end. I just feel like the ramp up takes longer, whereas this game the ramp up is very sudden. But I feel like you hit it later in the game.
Okay, right. There's a point in this game where you're getting, and the first few times I played, I was a little nervous about this. And I thought it might be something I didn't like, but it's not. After I've played it, which is that you are starting to move through some of these rounds, and you're starting to say, there's not a lot of the game left. Am I going to be able to accomplish what I want to accomplish? And for the most part, you do hit this point when all of a sudden you just can do stuff. I
feel like usually it's somewhere around like round 8 or round 10.
Yeah.
At least in the 2-person game, somewhere between round 8 and round 10, since you skipped 9, is where it really suddenly picks up and you feel like you can suddenly accomplish a lot.
Okay. So replayability. I think the replayability high.
Very high.
Yep. Some people have criticized it in that there's not enough randomness in the game.
I don't think this game needs it.
I don't think it does. I think you have more replayability because of the lack of randomness, at least at 2.
Might be different.
Might be different at higher player counts. That's a big thing that we have found in playing games with more than just us and just us, and also seeing other people's experience. There's a lot of games that people dislike for certain reasons that when you play it with 2 are not applicable, and the game is deeper.
Yeah.
Like 5 Tribes is a big one, where when you play it with more than 2,
I could easily see it would get bogged down and be
the
really
turns
boring.
Are going to get all messed up,
and it's going to get boring.
In this game, with 2, it's really strategic and very intense and tactical rather, and very kind of you're really thinking about it.
I mean, with more players, you do get to use these other boards.
Yeah, you get other things. So the game is really balanced well for more people too, in terms of it's intentionally balanced for different player counts. But in any event, the thing is that because it's not random, that means that you're not playing against the randomness of the game every time.
You're not all. Once we get a little bit better at it, I don't think we're quite at that point yet. But once we get better at it, we won't be playing the game anymore necessarily. We'll be playing each other.
You're playing the other person.
Yeah.
Yep. And so you're always
it's more like chess.
It's more like chess in that way. No, it's not going to necessarily be as deep as chess. At least
and that's fine.
Not in the way that chess is deep.
No.
But that there's this constantly evolving game, especially again if you have 2 people, and especially if it's the same person you're playing all the time. You're going to be developing this kind of he knows that she knows that he knows that he knows that she knows, that kind of thing.
I know that last time he did this and this and this and it worked really well for him, so how can I steal that strategy and make it work for me this time?
Or how can I stop him from doing it once I see him doing it again? That's the thing about chess. Oh, he's doing this thing again.
How do I keep him from doing it?
What do I do to stop him?
How do I stop his whatever maneuver
without messing up what I'm trying to do?
Yeah. How do I defend against this while still getting my thing done?
Yeah. Okay. Finally, any downsides?
I mean, the only possible downside that I could see with this game would have been setup, but since we have these trays that he made out of foam core and hot glue, the setup is not really that arduous. I think the setup for the video took less than 5 minutes.
The first time when we tried to play this game, we didn't play it because it spent so much time trying to figure out how to set it up that we just never were able to get to it. There's a lot of pieces here. Now, they do give you in the box, they give you a bajillion little baggies. I mean,
They give you baggies for basically everything.
You can get it all organized, but...
Then every time you get it out, you have to pull them all out. You have to set them up.
So this is the first game I've ever had organizers for. And, I mean, I went ahead and made these, and they've worked really well. And it wasn't too hard to make them. And there's different companies that make these things. You can order them.
Yeah.
And it just fits right in the box. And it all fits very nicely. But the nice thing is that all the components and stuff, we just pull them out. And there's no setup. They're always set up right out of the box. The only real setup is shuffle these cards.
And set these
tiles up. And these take a little bit of time.
This is the thing that takes the longest.
With the organizer, they're all in order.
We set them up in order,
so it's just pretty quick.
Yeah.
So that is, I guess, a downside, sort of.
That's the only possible downside I could see to this game would be setup if we didn't have these. Because we have these, I don't see that as a downside. But if you don't have the craftiness, handiness to make something like this, or if you don't have the budget, I could see where components could be a downside to this game.
So I guess I would say that this game is really highly recommended if you have an organizer. And I'm half kidding. If you don't have an organizer,
it's still worth it.
It's still worth it, but it really does make a difference.
It makes it easier to play more often.
So, in any event, yes, recommended very highly.
Did you have any downsides that you thought of?
Just the setup, but it's not. But again, once you get something, a system, it's not that bad.
Yeah.
And like you said, 5 minutes maybe.
Yeah.
For all this stuff, so good for 2. It's popular with more than 2, of course, but I think it really does work very nicely.
Very well with 2.
Yep.
We can't speak to higher than 2 because we haven't played it with more than 2.
We'd have to find somebody who's dweeby enough like us to want to play a game like this.
To play this with us.
So, in any event, let us know what you think. If there's any other games that you think we ought to check out, let us know about that.
Just don't send us the cooperative games because he does not want to cooperate with me when we play games. He wants to go against me.
I don't want to cooperate. I want to play a game. I want to beat you.
What about beating the game?
That's boring.
Bye.